Today our guest is Josh Furlow. Josh is a good friend of mine, and we just wanted to bring him in and just talk about his story in business and in production and all the cool things that he has to offer. So, Josh, please tell us where you're from, who you are, what you do. Kind of give us that quick little rundown.
Who is Josh?
Who is Josh?
Yeah, so originally I was born and raised in Detroit. Grew up right outside of Detroit. Spent my younger years there. Went to Michigan State University. My family's all still in Michigan. Once I graduated, it was just time for me to get out. Was always fascinated on the production, always fascinated on logistics. So I jumped really quick into the production world, and kind of the rest is history from there. But born and raised in Michigan, and have been nomadic for majority of my life up until the last 5 or so years.
That's awesome.
What brought you to Columbia?
My wife. So it's we were living West Coast. In 2017, sold a business that was based out of San Diego to a group. It was a Chinese-backed group, but then consolidated us with another group into Tampa. And it wasn't, a move into Tampa wasn't in my future. So balancing, the SoCal lifestyle versus Florida lifestyle. It was just time to go. So I, finished my earn out, my exit, and Erin, my wife, was like, it's time to go back home. So we packed up the bags.
So she's from here?
She's from here, born and raised. So
that's awesome. Brian got brought here by football.
Yeah.
So
Wisconsin too,
There you go.
Northern Midwest. What?
And I have a Tigers hat in my car. I could have worn my Tigers hat today in honor of Detroit, but
and now after 30 years, you can put a Lions hat on and feel proud. So.
I don't know anything about the team. I just went to Detroit and bought a hat.
There you
So
go.
he recently went to Washington for a job that we had, and he got a Nationals hat.
Yeah, and that's my new favorite hat because it's bright red, and it's kind of a cool contrast to all the rest of the hats I have are blue. I don't know what's up with all of the teams have blue hats. So Mets have a blue hat, Yankees have a blue hat, Dodgers have a blue hat. Everybody's got a blue hat.
There you go.
But Nationals got a bright, and Tigers have a blue hat.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to Detroit in October
Okay.
for a conference, and I don't know what I'm gonna do because I've already got the.
You
already
get a
got
Lions
the Tigers
hat.
hat. I get it. I don't know.
You want to stick with the baseball?
But I might get a hockey hat. I was thinking about that. Like
Red
I haven't.
Wings.
Yeah, I haven't.
Just
Red Wings that have a cool hat.
Yeah, Red Wings or the city. The city is really proud of what they've been doing. Obviously, a couple key businesses and guys have been plowing a ton of money into the downtown area. So it's like every street corner you go on now. It's vibrant. You look at what kind of the Detroit badge what everyone's wearing. So just pick up a Detroit hat. So
the very first time I went to Detroit for a job was I guess it was probably 2014, maybe 13 or 14, and it was the first time I'd ever been there. And I've never been to a city like Detroit, which was like essentially 5 different. Like the places I went was like 5 different countries. Like when I went to the neighborhood was a different country.
Yeah.
Like the signs were not in English. Like, so it was really interesting as a Southern boy who's always lived here, to go to Detroit. And part of what we did was I went there to cover Southern Baptist missionaries. They were going to Detroit to kind of be in these other communities. And so we went to a neighborhood primarily that was with people from Bangladesh, and all of the signs were in their language. All of the restaurants were there. I mean, it was the first time I'd ever seen like Muslim men walking around in prayer robes and women in full burqas and different things. I'd never seen anything like that, and it was just interesting.
Yeah, it's the largest population of Middle Easterns next to the Middle East. Is my hometown, which is Dearborn.
Yeah.
So
right.
You're every street corner you go to, the most amazing foods. ATMs are in Arabic instead of English and Spanish. So it's a culture shift, and it's dramatically changed. I've been gone. I left in '98.
Okay.
Spent majority of from '98 up until 2017 on the road, and then now kind of anchored into a home base with a family base and a growing business base. So,
Well, tell us about your business now. What are you doing now for business?
so it's when we sold in 17, I was part of a private equity group that we had rolled up a bunch of media and sports properties, primarily focused on endurance sports and open air events. So running triathlon events. So we had bought and built a number of businesses through that for a period of almost 10 years.
So, like, when you say those properties, would it be like Rock and Roll Heart, the Rock and Roll Series marathon type thing? So the companies that put those things on?
So
or?
the original business thesis was buy the events, support it with the media, and then everything around the ecosystem between the ticketing, the merchandise, the advertising, and it kind of goes through the business channels. So there was a small mom and pop run business in San Diego called Competitor Group, where it was elite racing at the beginning. Then we came in, acquired it, turned it into the Competitor Group. It was a collection of 9 events, primarily running events, half marathons, full marathons, under the banner of Rock and Roll Marathon.
Oh,
So those were the first 9 events, and then grew that to 31 domestically and another 15 or 18 or so internationally, and then sold to Dalian Wanda out of Beijing, who had then acquired the Ironman Triathlon Series. So we brought that together as one big group underneath the Ironman brand. So that was 2017. It was an exhausting run for, it was just a complete blitz of a lifestyle, 300 plus days a year on the road, buying and building businesses and operating the businesses at the same time.
yeah. So what was your role in that?
I originally, in 2010, I was with Anschutz Entertainment Group out of LA, and got poached or recruited by this private equity group to move to San Diego to be the head of operations of how things work, city logistics, all of the other nuances of a 26.2 mile parade / party through a city in mostly big metropolitan areas. So I came in as the global head of operations, and over a series of growth, we sold the business 2 years into me joining it, and then obviously a little bit of a changing of the guard, and I was elevated then to the president and CEO of that overall business.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And so I took that from 2010 as head of operations, eventually 8 to 10 years later became the president CEO of that business group. And then we went through 3 different sales in that almost 10-year period. And I was, one of the 2 or 3 people that decided and was crazy enough to stay on through 3 different ownership groups and 3 sales, one of them very chaotic, and then finally exited.
Yeah.
So now in 17, I continued kind of my contractual obligations with Ironman through middle of 18, almost 19, and a former business associate, a sponsorship agency partner of mine in revenue generation. He was exiting his business. They had just sold their business and randomly just called and said, hey, let's catch up. He's like, oh, I just sold. I'm like, oh, we just sold. I'm sitting on the sidelines for a little bit. I'm just a little breather. What do you think about coming together on business? He's like, yeah, worst comes to worst. It fails, and we just go back to getting jobs. So that was in the end of 2019. And so we were like, okay, if it fails, so be it. But we have one thing we want to do is not necessarily have to work for somebody else, and only work in, invest in, and play in sports, entertainment, and hospitality. So those 3 segments of the business is the only thing we do now.
What other segments, like, I guess, car shows? I mean,
Well,
that,
just
that
in
seems like
terms
a lot of the,
it's a
the
very
bulk of it.
it's a wide kind of swath
Yeah.
of businesses, but there's there's a million different things between the banking industry or the components or parts or manufacturing side of the business. There's you look at everyone's portfolio of businesses. It can be everything from a quick service restaurant to a media studio, right?
Yeah.
So we know what we like. We like doing deals. We like raising capital. We like operating. We balance the business where I am the key operator, can assemble the teams, know how to work with the teams, how to motivate the teams, eventually driving efficiencies between multiple different businesses, somewhat like-minded, or some of them are completely opposite and they're just kind of standalone. Mm-hmm. So right now we've got a portfolio of 6 to 8 active businesses, all within those verticals of sports, entertainment, hospitality. Some of them we're just doing revenue generation or sponsorship or media sale deals. A lot of them, the thread that goes through all of them is strategy, consulting, and then we can then come in and insert ourselves as the key operators. And so it's just one of those wild scenarios. Every day is different. Yeah. Every business is different. Every business climate's different.
And I get the impression you're going all over the country to manage and oversee this stuff, right?
Yeah, we're not only country, but we're in multiple different territories based on projects. We have a couple key projects right now in the UK. A lot of it is domestic based right now in the US. I'm in between Atlanta and LA quite often with our film production business. So that's obviously the tax friendly states and credits is where the production goes. So now that production's finally lifting and coming back, it's ramping back up on that side of the business. So that's keeping me on the move quite a bit.
How many people? So it's you and your business partner started it, and then how many people do you have underneath helping you with all the logistics and management, or are you getting 1,000 emails a day?
Yeah, there's I wouldn't say 1,000 a day, but there's hundreds a day. My business partner's Boston based. So him and I are constantly kind of playing air traffic control of what's going on. We changed a little bit of the business model we didn't want to have hundreds of employees. It's a freelance world, heavy on the production side, where we want people to be motivated on the projects and the gigs that they're working on that day. But if they get a phone call with an amazing opportunity, we want them to go take that opportunity on a contract base and come back to us. So we look at it like a little bit of the free world mentality of, don't think of this as a W-2 job as you're plugging in as a time clock and then you're plugging out sometime in the afternoon. Like, be motivated, be creative, and then at the same time, be creative enough to always want to come back and bring those resources to the table for us. So it's an interesting model. Rewind 2 years ago with the production company, which was Monolith Studios, heavily focused on TV and film, the LED design and architecture of all of the digital backdrops, the 3D and 2D assets, of recreating places and things inside the studio. We built that up. We were 40 people strong because you needed the volume of people working as like your key members of staff on set. But then the strike hit, and watched revenue go to zero last July.
Yikes.
And it was on a trajectory of being a massive year last year. July 13th hit, and it's like ripcord goes. Unfortunately, by the end of that year last year, we went from 42 employees down to zero because of the industry strike. But then we kind of just played a reset of like, okay, we don't need to have a massive OpEx or an overhead on a monthly basis. Let's look at.
We're going through a reset too, aren't we?
Yeah, everybody is. So it's just, and we're doing that across the board. So our
smaller scale. I mean, in a considerably smaller scale. But
yes. Yeah, but now it's like, rather than staring at the balance sheet and then the monthly cost of like, okay, I need to pay employee or associate 1 through 40 every single 2 weeks, you don't have to stress about that. It's like the clients are good at paying most times. When it comes in, we go back to that resource pool, and you hire them to come on the job, and you pay them just as good. But then when that job's over, you hopefully have another job right behind it. If not, then you have kind of the peaks and valleys where we don't have to sit there and just hemorrhage cash on a weekly basis.
All right. Well, that's all I needed from this podcast. That's right. Thank you. I need
That
to go write that. I need to go write that down.
Josh
Josh says you don't need to hemorrhage cash on a. I love it.
No,
Let's not do that.
No, and it's just like and believe me, I was as the key operator. We have investors with us on a handful of these businesses and projects. And when that strike hit across the board, and as you know, you have to respect the process of what the unions had to speak for. At the same time, the collateral damage that it did across the industry, like I was getting phone calls every hour of like, I'm losing my car, I'm going to lose my house. And this wasn't our guys, but this is just everyone in the industry of like, we have no projects lined up for the next year. And
it's still recovering, right?
It's what now, almost September of 24. And it's just now kicking back in.
Wow.
And part of that is because all the bigger studios cut the budgets, had to reserve, and they're all going through their growing pains as well.
And all the TV shows last season did half seasons, right? So like instead of doing
seasons,
20, they were doing 10.
Or what happened, and this is my own personal take on it. They knew there was one more potential strike with the Teamsters, and they're like, let's just take the slate and move it to 25 because we don't want to get into the middle of production and have to pull the ripcord again, and everyone's back on the streets. So they're doing it the right. They're doing it the right way. Just wait, be patient. Everyone's labor agreements. Everyone's kind of in a happy zone, other than the scariness of AI. But it's everyone gets back into the saddle full 25. Those of us who are going to survive till 25, it should be lights out in a good way.
Fortunately, you're well diversified.
Yeah.
Well, you got to do something, right?
If we were solely based on the film and TV, I'd be sweeping floors for you guys or changing the, changing the parking lot signs, because we rolled a lot of cash into that business with our investors.
Because the potential was high at the time.
It was very asset driven, so it was a heavy asset base with millions and millions of dollars of LED purchases. And then when production stops, which no one forecasted that, you still have debt service.
Yeah.
You still had
Can we get a big LED wall for pennies on the dollar right now?
Because we could do like this whole wall right here. We could just like make that whole thing an LED.
The fortunate but unfortunate side of what I just had to go through is I know where every secondary market is for the LED assets.
Right. So we have Bill's got a buddy up in Greenville who's got a giant LED wall studio.
Yeah.
And
it's a 40.
We fantasize about that.
A 40 wide by 20 tall
Yeah.
LED wall, and I have talked to him about this 3 or 4 times. I don't understand how anybody can afford to do that.
The original business thesis on that, it was like anyone that had a checkbook next to them were like, oh, we're buying all the equipment. Then it was like, build it as big as you can. And when I'm saying build it, the LED volume or LED walls.
Yeah.
So everyone, including ourselves, got caught into that. Build it as big as it goes, and all of the productions will come to you. Then the productions, which
just went away.
They're very smart at what they are. It's like, wait a second, that equipment is a commodity.
Right.
I'm going to pit Brian against me against you, and I don't care about the equipment because the equipment still says the same brand manufacturer on it.
Right.
I want the team that goes with it.
Right.
So we realized that really quick, that let the UPMs beat the hell out of us on price.
Right.
There's going to be some very large asset-based companies that are supplying the concert industry, supplying the 40-foot wall that you guys want, everything else. We will focus on the key services and the people, and then we can use anybody's equipment. So that's what we're doing right now, rather than having a warehouse in Burbank, a warehouse in Atlanta full of
stuff
millions of gear
able to get.
So we just offloaded and sold almost all of that gear. Actually,
Wow.
sold all of the gear in the secondary market because I needed to return a bunch of that capital back to the investors and the banks. So,
Well, let's go back.
Well,
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
You are dealing with so many freelancers and freelancers that have very specific, in some cases, very specific things that they do, right?
Trades.
How do you qualify them, and how do you make sure that they're gonna be good at doing what they say they can do?
good question. A lot of I call it almost like the full-time freelance pool. There's a bunch of trusted guys and girls, everything from writers to 3D artists to visual production and virtual production experts, rigging gaffers to just stagehands. It's a lot of the same team has come with our key guys and some of our other key partners for the last 10, 15 years. They've been in this, high, quality, creative freelance market, and they know where they're going to go for the jobs.
So the market reinforces that's what I was thinking. Probably,
But you're
like,
you're also almost hiring a captain. Like this
Yeah,
is this department. I'm getting you, and then you fill out your team.
And that's kind of like we have. So there's one of the businesses is a heavy and high end creative. Mm-hmm. It's called Future. They deal with very high end clients on everything from blockchain and Web3 strategy to implementation of creative and digital assets within the gaming and the and kind of the Web3 space. Those freelancers are always, they're very sought after. But one of our key partners is one of the best creatives in the world, where he sits on top of kind of the heap of resources and
manages it.
And by project, oh, so and so is going to be great for this one. Oh, I'm gonna pause on this 3D artist because we need to bring he or she over to the next project that's in the queue.
How do you find them though? Do you recruit them?
We recruit them.
Network? What does that networking look like?
but I think at that level, there's a pool.
There's
right?
a pool, but there's always a constant search
Sure.
to increase that pool, because once again, like the directors, the producers, the technicians are always going from project to project. So our biggest thing is we're constantly internally and externally recruiting and just actively pushing out who and what we're working with, and everyone wants to work on cool things.
Yeah.
We're working on a lot of cool things, and we take it as the kind of the work. I call it the worker bee mentality. Like we want to do the work as well. We don't want to just sit in an office and conduct the work, because then we just become an agency, and we don't want to be an agency.
Interesting. So, and look, I love this stuff. I could talk about this all day long. And I got to do a conference with Vince Gilligan's DP, who is just the guy that shot all of Breaking Bad, shot Better Call Saul, and shot the El Camino movie. And he did an hour and a half on lighting.
Yep.
Which was just the coolest thing that I'd ever seen, right? Except that he was bringing in, RE Sky panels and, 24-foot scrims, and he had an Alexa with a $20,000 lens on it. And I was like, well, okay, sure. I mean, and then he had all these guys doing everything for him. But all of these guys throughout that whole week that I was at that conference, they had all been working together for 10, 15 years. They all knew each other. It was a pool of talent that's probably very difficult to get into, right? You're not going to be in that referral circle unless you are already there,
Yeah, and it's the referral circle, and it's the street cred side of it. Of like, here's your book of business,
right? Yeah.
Here's your portfolio. We know what everyone has done.
Yeah.
And then if it goes from the high end creative business and strategy business to the on-set services, which is what Monolith really does, is providing those key resources on set Yes, we can play with all the fancy equipment. Yes, we can put up all the walls. Yes, we can patch all the wires in engineering. But if you haven't been battle tested in a very high intensity world of a director, producer, a DP yelling and screaming, or
Why is it always the DP?
or like what you feel is 20 minutes staring at you, and it's really 1 minute because you're just trying to, the operator's trying to, key some different code in.
You got a break for lunch.
Yeah, you want that battle tested, and just an even keel person on set or behind the editing bay or in the studio when we're with some of our key clients producing the next show.
So it's interesting because we operate in a micro market outside of any of that structure,
Yep.
right? Because obviously there are people that live in Columbia, certainly in South Carolina, that play in that game, but we don't operate within that. So one of the challenges that we run across when we're hiring freelancers, especially, is how in the world do we know whether they can get the job done?
Yeah.
And the jobs are, sometimes micro jobs. They're jobs that are match the market. But I love this idea of just having the pool of talented people. Their qualifications. They're, like you said, they're battle tested. That I think of that and go, whoa, that would be really cool. But so much of what we do is, Stephanie has to know how to run the cameras, how to get the audio set, how to do the lighting, how to stage everything, make sure that we don't have the luxury of art direction in a lot of cases, all that kind of stuff. And so it's definitely a different world.
And based on budget, you can always hop on a plane or a car and bring those individuals in, because I'm physically here. My business partner is in Boston. Our head of creative and partner is in Denver.
Yeah.
We have a handful of our team members and partners in LA. We have a few overseas. So it's like we're scattered all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
But it comes into the resource sharing.
Yeah.
And then on a weekly basis of what we're looking at is like what opportunities are there. Oh, wait, we have this project coming up. It needs a cinematographer. It needs a 3D artist, and it needs some other financial resource planning.
Yeah.
Okay, then our centralized services can come in, and we can help sort it out.
That's very cool. So the question I was going to ask is, at what point do you feel like you go, oh, this is the thing? Like, when you I guess exited your previous company, I wonder about that sort of entrepreneurial brain where you get to the point where you go, this thing is going to be a big thing, right? And instead of maybe micro niching, like, this is the thing I really love to do and I'm just going to focus on this, right. You think about, how do I turn this thing that I love into something big? How did you kind of figure that out?
It just reps.
Yeah.
It's just and it's all numbers. So if you have 100 deals on the board and you want to close 4 of them, what are those opportunities?
Yeah.
And it's like, what's the opportunities, but at the same time, what's the scale of that opportunity? It's okay if you want to just be in that little niche side of it. But if we want to look at it from a standpoint of, if it becomes just a job, then we're not going to be passionate about it. Like, it has to be something we all love to do.
Yeah.
But can we grow it? Can you scale it? And sometimes it takes, 7, 8 different looks at something, or 7 or 8 different businesses at the same time, and 2 or 3 will just go away, or 2 or 3 will become just a little incubator that we can then turn into deal flow,
right,
for the bigger opportunities.
So were you a marathoner? Is that something like, so what drew you to that?
I'm a production nerd. I would, sit like a little kid. I'd be sitting in the theater or sitting in a stage somewhere and more curious about who was up in the steel, right, and how is that rope and how is that chain motor going up and down versus listening to the music.
Right. I gotcha.
That turned into like a mind-blowing experience. Like, wait a second, I can get a job by doing that.
Right.
And and kind of the rest is history of like making phone calls and 90% good luck, 10% hard work, as I always say, just right place, right time.
But maximizing that opportunity when you find it.
And just like I always tell myself, and I always tell everyone I'm working with, like, you can't outwork me.
Right.
Like, it's not, it drives everyone crazy because it's like the phone rings 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. But to me, it's not work. To me, it's connecting the dots, and I'm one more phone call away from connecting to another big idea.
Yeah. Success is exhausting. That's what I always say, you know?
Yeah, it's like for us, it's not a grind, right? So it's it is a grind in some cases. Like there's some situations that where we get beat to hell, right? So it's exhausting. It's stressful. The strike was very exhausting, very stressful. We watched a very large company go from way up top to 0 employees and $0 in a week.
Right.
I could have cried and just gone home and say, okay, now what? But like Brian was saying, thank goodness we were diversified.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to cry and go home. I had about 2 seconds of going like, oh shit, now what do we do?
Yeah.
And then let's pull up the bootstraps.
Just
There's
on.
value in that property. We have to do the right thing for the investors. We're still paying people back. That got kind of caught in this zone of like no revenue coming in, pay the bills, and eventually build that thing right back up.
Yeah. Because that was a perfect storm, the two unions striking at the same time.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
But the diversification, like the sports, like our revenue side of the business or revenue generation side of the business is still going and still was going. The creative, the high level creative side of the business was still going. And you just have to get scrappy. That's part of it's like everyone always asks what are you? What are you doing? It's like, oh, you must be an entrepreneur. It's like, no, I'm just like, I'm a deal junkie who likes business, who likes operating. And it's like entrepreneur is like, everyone wants to say they're an entrepreneur, right? So it's like,
I hate that word so much.
yeah, it's just like,
like I said, nobody wants to accept their label, right?
Well,
somebody puts a label on you, you go, no, that's not me.
Yeah.
no,
Right?
and I've always been like, whatever, put a label on me. But it's like, like me, it's more of like, let it just be the mystery of like, oh, what does that guy do? But behind the scenes, we're connecting the dots on 7-8 different businesses at a time. And some of them chug along, and some of them, to your last question, we see massive opportunity based on the scale of what that industry is, and we double down on it.
And so you say reps, and what you mean, I'm assuming when you say reps, is that it's just taking enough chances that something is going
Absolutely.
to, yeah.
And some people always will tell us and have told us, like, focus on one thing and one thing only. But it's like, in this industry, it's impossible to focus on one thing only, unless I'm selling you the tripod and the light.
Yeah.
Like if I can be the best salesman for that light or that camera, then I will be at every doorstep doing that.
But in that end of it, you've got B&H that's the monolith, right?
Yeah.
And so you think to yourself, okay, if I'm going to sell tripods and lights and cameras, how do I convince you as a person who's buying that stuff not to go to B&H? Because B&H is the easiest way to do it. It's streamlined. It's usually the cheapest or closest to the cheapest.
And they're going to get the first look
Yep.
at every new piece of gear coming in.
Yeah.
So for being naive to what we were 4 years ago on the LED side of the business is let the big gear houses worry
that
about
part.
that.
Yeah.
Let the big gear houses take the new next panel.
Yeah.
Then we will make the big gear houses a lot of money by renting those panels from them.
Well, and frankly, the reason why I have any of the lights that I have is because I called B&H looking for a different light.
Yeah.
And the guy on the phone says, no, that's not the light you want. You want to go with this other thing, right? And so that's almost kind of what I rely on B&H for right now is I get on the app and I'll find the thing I want, and then I'll call him because I know that the minute I call him, he's like, no, that's not what you want. Let's go this other way. And it's that expertise that helps.
It's expertise, but at the same time, it's the trusted partners in-house with us.
Yeah.
With our key partners, where like none of us are necessarily being paid from the business. We're being paid by projects and overall distributions of those businesses.
Right.
And when you have those trusted advisors being your partners in-house,
Yeah.
They know what the next gear is. They know who the next person from the freelance pool should be. And then we can adapt to the emerging technology side. We can adapt to the boring finances and running the business side of it. And then it's always answering the phone, waiting for who wants to pitch us the next business, who wants to pitch us the next deal. And then say, okay, is this worth our time or effort? Is it something we like, or can it benefit one of the other businesses that we're operating?
Well, imagine with the LED stuff too, just as an example, 4 years ago, the LED technology had to have been different than it is now, right? It's got to be progressing.
It's like the technology itself changes on that side, like every 3 to 5 years. It really, yes, the manufacturers will have a new set of panels coming out, but no different than
It's not just like micro improvements.
It's a very, very competitive world from the manufacturer side of it on that side. And that's why the worst thing that happened was a strike. The best thing that happened was a strike, because it made us realize, like, let it be the commodity.
Yeah.
We still will play and operate and design and implement using that tool, but never again are we going to own 2 warehouses full of stuff.
Well, you're the second guest that we've had on here that runs let's just say an international business from Colombia. What are the challenges of that for you? Like running that, is the world flat at the level that you can say it doesn't really matter where you live, or is
pre-COVID? There's no way.
Yeah,
there's no way it could have been. No way we could be doing what we're doing now, because I would have picked up the phone, or the phone would have rang from Universal or Netflix or any one of the other bigger creative partners, and they're like, Columbia, South Carolina, what? Like, we can't take
you're
you
not
serious.
Qualified because
we can't
you live
take you
in
serious because
Columbia.
you're not in New York, or you're not in
Right.
LA.
Yeah.
Or you're not in London.
Right.
Or some of the high fashion houses that we're dealing with. Like, if anyone would have called and said, oh, where are you based out of? Like, oh, Columbia, South Carolina. It just mentally and industry-wise, they're like, oh, whatever. COVID hits, Zoom and Teams and Google Meets, everything else is acceptable. Mm-hmm. Now it's saved on time, energy, getting on the airplane for that first meeting, or even the first, second, third meeting. The efficiencies became there, and then the world is flat, because then it's a 20-minute ride to the airport, and I park my car, and I'm in Atlanta in 27 minutes, and I can be anywhere in the world in less than 12 hours.
So does it become, you think, more of a meritocracy, more of like, what I can do is more important than sort of where I live or proximity or who I know? Yeah,
because like you can get on an airplane anytime you want.
Yeah.
Pending, airplane's not full, or pending a thunderstorm's not happening on a 4:00 flight,
or
right?
or software going down all
or
over the world.
CrowdStrike hitting the wrong button, and then
oops,
which I got stuck in Jamaica, and when all the screens are blue, it's like, oh, not a bad spot to be stuck in.
Sure,
I'll go back to meeting with the team in Jamaica.
I have honestly found no matter where you're stuck, it gets tedious no matter where you're stuck.
In travel, travel, it's not for the level of travel that I do and some of my other partners. It's just part of our DNA, right?
Now, are you still traveling as much? You said 300 days a year. So
no, it's like that. That was up until Jack and Aaron came into my life, and up until then we had our second child. It wasn't feasible to have a full-time family and a full-time 300 days a year on the road. So unfortunately that previously, I had a lot of consequences of being on the road for 300 days a year.
So. Oh yeah, sure. Well, it can't be easy on kids are a factor always, but it can't be easy even without kids.
No, it's just a brutal lifestyle. But even now, it's like I traveled an obnoxious amount, but it's manageable. It helps that we're in this community, right? It's like, from what I thought it was going to be 7 years ago when we moved to what it is now, It's everything's convenient. Yes, everyone complains they got to drive 20 minutes away. It's like, oh, come on, like
20 minutes.
Yeah, it's
Just
like
go spend a half a day in
yeah, like,
LA and you'll never want to drive
leave
again.
the west side of LA and get to Burbank for a 9:00 meeting. It's like, good luck. Or like San Diego, to where my old office used to be in San Diego, and it's like
It's not even that.
90
Go to
minutes just to
Atlanta.
get there.
Go to Atlanta from 4:00 in the afternoon until 7 in the evening. You can't get anywhere.
Oh, it's brutal. So
Yeah.
it's just like, so that's where it's like, it's all how you take it. Like there's always
Yeah.
going to be someone that thinks it's the worst, but it's just like, if I can get on an airplane,
Yeah.
which is very convenient, get on an airplane and I can be anywhere on that same day. It's all relative because you just have to be present. And I
Yeah.
show up in the meetings. We'll show up, on set, and it doesn't matter where you live.
Well, so part of what we try to talk about a lot is, we're in the marketing space
Yeah.
here in Columbia, and again a micro market, but we do a lot of work with folks here. Your business seems to be driven by relationships as much as anything, and I assume that you guys probably don't do any real public facing marketing.
We don't.
And so that I think that's a really fascinating element, right? That I think everybody probably would want to get their business to that point where we do know outward facing marketing. But the businesses you work with, do they do outward facing marketing? Do you have any element of that in what you do?
Eventually we should.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last couple of years, this is like a weekly conversation we have internally.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a big opportunity to look at the assets that we have under one umbrella,
Right.
do the right messaging, the right marketing, without confusing the hell out of everybody of like, what is this, the pot of soup you're making.
Yeah.
But eventually we should be pushing that externally. We just haven't felt comfortable enough yet of what the right story is. So maybe that's where as told by comes into play, Brian.
We tell stories.
Give the little guy a shot.
No, but I do think, and every time I'm driving around town, it's like I like looking at a certain building, or could that be the right production location? The proximity to Charleston, the proximity to Wilmington, the proximity to Atlanta. It's
yeah.
not that far away,
Right.
and with the right
Columbia, the center of everything.
with the right incentive, which if there's a core group of us locally to push the city leaders, to push the state leaders, to just open up that tax incentive or even start a tax incentive,
Yeah.
that little niche side of the business that you're talking about would be servicing everybody from here in Columbia.
They had a tax incentive years ago, and it must have gone away. But like when all the productions came into Charleston and they were
Yeah.
doing so many, probably 15 years ago,
Yeah.
it was here, but it's just kind of gone away.
And I haven't seen any movies being made in Columbia.
But for a
years.
while,
No,
like
for a long
Kevin
time,
Bacon
we had a
was
couple.
there. And
Yeah, we had that
bunch of.
But
that,
Wilmington is, because they have the incentives right and the facilities are there.
Yeah.
Atlanta's Atlanta.
Atlanta is just a monolith, right? It's the East Coast center of
No, it really is.
production.
And then obviously with, during strike and now kind of tailing out of it, like a lot of that went to Toronto.
Yeah.
A lot of it went back to Vancouver. So it's just
But
a constant juggle.
You have Outer Banks and Righteous Gemstones being filmed in Charleston, and I mean those are two gigantic hit shows universally.
Yeah.
And it's not niche programming like it used to be. It used to be like the only thing we would get here is niche, like we're going to go down to the South and see what weird stuff is going on. And that's really all that ever happened. And so now we've got kind of, Wilmington's always been a center, but Charleston has become, much more.
Yeah, and that's more for like what I would call the tier 1, tier 2, like film and TV market. But
yeah,
there's a ton of work and a ton of money to be made in this like brand advertising world, which
Oh,
we
yeah.
never really cracked into because we were always so distracted on the film and TV side.
Making good money on the other
just
side.
getting beat up on everything else. So.
That's right. That's
But
really funny.
we're in the brand world every single day.
Yeah.
And those brands will go to a location based on expenses. So it's like if we can build the right facilities here,
Yeah.
to have your right wall and have your right technology and have the right storytelling,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Well, and one of the things we've been talking about is team is so important.
Yeah.
From our perspective, is just to say, look, anybody can rent a space, right? But to be able to get a team that can say, here's the right thing to say, here's the story of this, here's the way that it should be delivered.
Right.
That stuff is huge, and everything else is technical. Everything else can just be done. If you can figure out how to tell the story. Story is what people want.
Yeah.
They don't want the product; they want the story. And so, but I'm always fascinated with companies that don't do marketing because, so many people do it so badly and so wrong and waste so much time and energy doing it. Where things could be done so much better.
Yeah, and
otherwise
feel like they need to do it. So so it is forced, and it's just a grotesque waste of money with some of these budgets.
And it's budgeted, right? They budget it into their thing because it's a percentage of gross revenue, and you feel like you have to spend it, and so many people are just throwing it out the window.
Right.
And that's our whole purpose is be able to say, look, don't throw your marketing money out the window. Let's make real connections with people, and start it to that point where you don't have to have marketing anymore.
Yeah.
But we work with so many clients that are their audience is so incredibly narrow. Like your audience is for what you do
Right.
is so incredibly narrow. It's hard to tell the story in that way. It's hard to kind of do that stuff, and I love that challenge. I would hate to have to sell Coke. Coke is the easiest thing in the world to sell. You just say, Coke, come get a Coke.
Yeah, you recognize what that brand is.
Not that
the
interesting.
cursive writing in the red can, right? But
Yeah.
But just because we're not doing the marketing on behalf of our portfolio business, like we're the chameleon. So we're in house and are essentially white labeled inside a number of massive businesses around the world.
Sure.
We act as their team. Their teams are coming to us on what is that right strategy, what is that right spend, and here is the right production. No different than whatever your favorite TV show is this week or your favorite film of all time. Like that production company was a third-party production company.
Sure.
Hired by freelancers and operated by freelancers to produce the film for Netflix or Universal.
What's what I've always said, the worst movie you've ever seen was shot well. Right?
Exactly.
The movies fail all the time that were shot really well.
Yeah.
Like they're lit well, they sound good,
Well,
that is never a factor.
I got one more question before we get to our favorite five.
Yeah.
Which is, what was your philosophy on brand building at this point? Like, how would you go about building brand for one of your companies or one of the companies that you tend to in your sphere?
Because in this referral circle you're talking about, that's really what you're talking about, is that the people have brand. They have equity built into their brand.
Yeah, you gotta be authentic. You can't shy away from doing something different. It has to look cool. It has to sound cool. And from our lens, it has to be perfect. And we will not release it or take it back to the client if we know it's not going to be perfect. And with that, you're going to stay true to the brand that we're working with or working for. Because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when you start looking at some of the brands we're working with. But at the same time, we're telling a different story. We're bringing a different twist with the emerging technology, and just have the ability to architect it very, very diligently and cost effective, that people want to come back.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good. I love the standard, and the standard is hard. That's a tough one.
Yeah, there's not like, we don't shy away from like half the people think we're crazy. Like we think we're crazy 90% of the time.
That's what I've always said. If people don't think you're crazy, you're not doing it. You're not going.
And we're taking on some like big lifts of projects through 25 and 26 that are just cool and different, haven't been done before, but using expertise from key pieces of technology. And we're also looking at new technology that we can implement to make a viewer's experience or a live audience experience completely different than what they can normally see on a daily basis.
That's really cool.
So we end every podcast with 5 favorites. So, what's your favorite dessert?
Chocolate cake.
What is your favorite?
Wait a minute. I have a qualification on that. Chocolate on chocolate on chocolate, or chocolate with something like chocolate with a caramel in it, or
a warm chocolate cake.
Nice. Love it.
I love
All right.
it.
Very good.
A la mode or no?
No.
Just
Because then
straight
the ice
chocolate.
cream melts too much.
Purist.
It looks like milk. I don't like milk, so it's just like
Nice. Okay.
warm
All right.
chocolate cake.
Favorite TV show?
Favorite TV show. I'm a nerd for cooking, so I love everything like the cooking like genre can bring.
Okay.
So it's not
Nice.
like I don't have a like go back to childhood memory of like I love Scooby Doo. Like I go back remembering like I love watching cooking shows. I know that's not
It's
a direct answer
hey,
to number 2.
It is.
I had the realization when I was in college that Scooby-Doo was not made while I was a child. Scooby-Doo was made in the 60s.
Yeah.
And I did not put that together until I was in college. I thought Scooby-Doo was contemporary to my generation.
Until you were sitting in your Scooby Doo costume.
Well, the thing is, like,
partaking in your fun.
the NBA cameos and all that
Yeah.
stuff that happened on Scooby-Doo were all players from the late 60s that I was not familiar with. Movie stars, TV stars that I had no idea who they were.
Yeah.
And I just thought I was just a kid and didn't know them. And it was because they were from TV shows from the 60s and I just didn't know them. Sorry. ADD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite non-fictional character? Or fictional character, really. That was
Fictional character,
Fiction.
not non-fictional.
Yeah, non-fictional. I was like, what?
Non-fictional
That's wrong.
character is just a
Wait,
person.
Historic. Who's your favorite person?
My favorite person.
Favorite fictional character.
Fictional
Well, it's
character.
fictional and non-fictional. So
Yeah, whatever.
I'm
Yeah,
a
pick
big
person.
I'm a big U2 fan. So it's like
Oh.
Okay.
Bono the individual is fantastic, but Bono the entertainer is fictional and non-fictional to me.
That's true.
So,
That's true.
Interesting one.
You see that the
So,
U2
favorite
Sphere
song?
movie is coming out.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about that.
So is your favorite song a YouTube or a U2 song? What's your favorite
no,
song?
so it's like, like my constant Ferris wheel of entertainment, which is my brain, right? So it's like I love all music, and I honestly can say like I don't like. There's like years of like going to your first concert, and you know, like I fell in love with Metallica. Metallica, Guns N' Roses, my first concert.
Nice.
Like Enter Sandman, still in this day, is going to be one of my top, songs of a lifetime.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
Very good.
And finally,
First time we've had Metallica as
See,
an
there you
answer
go.
to that
Yeah.
question. That's awesome.
favorite season of the year?
fall.
Babies?
Because I can stop sweating here in Colombia.
You never stop sweating in Colombia.
Yeah, it's like I stop whimpering end of September, but I do like the change of the leaves in northern Michigan, and it means football season. We can have some fun. So
Babies or puppies?
interesting. I would say babies.
Nice.
Yeah. Got to say babies. It's if you have babies, you got to say
No,
babies.
not
That's
really.
it.
No,
You know, my wife definitely prefers the dog, but I don't know. It's a hard one.
Well, thanks for being and sitting with us
Oh, thank
for the As Told by You podcast. We've
Yeah.
really enjoyed the conversation and got to learn so much more about you.
cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for being here, Josh.
Hey, appreciate it.